Airports are places where thousands of stories cross paths every single day. Some are stories of vacations, of people finally getting a break from work and heading to beaches or mountains. Others are stories of reunions, where families are about to hug loved ones they haven't seen in years. And then there are the business travelers, the ones with laptops, ties, and quick steps, moving like they know the airport better than they know their own homes. This story begins in one of those airports. It was loud, crowded, and full of that mix of excitement and stress that air travel always brings. And in the middle of it all was a black family, standing together at their gate. They weren't dressed in anything unusual. They weren't doing anything to stand out. They were just a family, ready to get to their destination, ready for a trip they had been planning for months. This wasn't going to be an ordinary flight for them. They had booked first-class tickets. Not because someone gifted them, not because they won a lottery, not because of a surprise upgrade. They had chosen first class, worked hard, saved, and decided that this trip was the time to enjoy comfort, extra space, and a little peace. When boarding was called, they walked up like every other passenger, scanned their tickets, and found their way to the first-class cabin. The seats were wide, the legroom generous, the overhead bins almost empty. They settled in. Parents put bags away. Kids pulled out headphones and snacks. For a moment, it was calm. But the calm didn't last. Soon after boarding began, a flight attendant approached. At first, it seemed routine. Maybe she was going to check bags or confirm something. But instead of a smile, there was hesitation. Instead of, "Welcome aboard," there was a question. "Are you sure these are your seats?" The family looked confused. Of course, these were their seats. They had tickets. But the questioning didn't stop there. Another crew member came over. They asked again and again. The family pulled out their tickets, showed their boarding passes, even held up the receipts on their phones. But the tone of the questions didn't soften. Instead, it grew more insistent, as if the very sight of them in first class didn't quite fit the picture the crew expected. Other passengers began to notice. Some glanced over quickly, then looked away, uncomfortable but silent. A few leaned closer, listening. One or two started recording on their phones. The tension was impossible to ignore. Finally, the words came. "We're going to have to ask you to move." The family was stunned. Move? To where? Why? They had paid for these seats. There was no mistake. But the attendants insisted. They said there had been a mix-up, though they couldn't explain what kind of mix-up or why it only applied to this family. Imagine what that moment feels like. You're sitting with your kids, ready for a trip you've planned, and suddenly, in front of strangers, you're being told you don't belong. Not because of your ticket, not because of your payment, but because someone has decided, without reason, that you should move. The children looked scared. The parents tried to stay calm, even as frustration grew. They didn't want to make a scene. They didn't want to frighten their kids even more. But the humiliation was already there. And so, under pressure, with dozens of eyes on them, the family stood up. They gathered their belongings, their bags, their headphones, and their dignity, and stepped into the aisle. The cabin was silent, heavy with discomfort. Passengers shifted in their seats, avoiding eye contact, not sure whether to speak up or stay quiet. It seemed like the family's story on this flight would be one of embarrassment and pain. But no one on board, not the passengers, not the crew, and not even the family, could have guessed what would happen next. Because in just a few minutes, the airline's CEO would walk onto that very plane. The family stood in the aisle, uncertain of where they were supposed to go. Their bags were heavy in their hands, their kids holding on tightly to their parents' arms. It felt like time had slowed. And then, something unusual happened. From the front of the plane, a man in a dark suit stepped inside. He didn't have the look of a pilot. He wasn't dressed like cabin crew. His presence was different. Confident but calm. Some passengers barely noticed him at first. But a few recognized his face. Whispers started. "Is that the CEO?" "Yes." By coincidence, or fate, or pure timing, The chief executive of the airline was boarding this exact flight. He was supposed to fly quietly, just like any other passenger, but instead, he walked straight into a scene of tension. He noticed it immediately. The silence. The uneasy looks. The family standing awkwardly in the aisle while the crew whispered. Something wasn't right. He approached the nearest attendant and asked, "What's happening here?" The response was vague. Something about a seating issue. A mix-up. Nothing serious, they said. But the CEO wasn't convinced. He looked at the family. He saw the unease on their faces, the embarrassment in their posture, and the way the children clung to their parents. He walked over to them directly. "Hello, I'm sorry," he said, introducing himself. "Can you tell me what's going on?" The parents explained everything. Calmly but firmly, they told him they had purchased first-class tickets, showed him their passes, even held out their confirmation emails. They explained how, despite showing proof, they were told to move without reason. The CEO listened. And as he listened, his expression shifted. Concern. Disbelief. Then disappointment. He turned back to the crew. "They have tickets for these seats," he said. "Why are they not sitting here?" Silence. No clear answer. The CEO didn't raise his voice. He didn't create a scene. But his authority filled the space. "These seats are theirs," he said firmly. "They are to sit here. Right now." Passengers began murmuring. Some nodded quietly. A few clapped softly, almost unsure if they should. The family hesitated for a moment, shocked at the sudden change. But then, slowly, they returned to their seats. The CEO didn't stop there. He sat down in the aisle for a few minutes, talking quietly with the family, apologizing for what had happened, making sure they felt secure. He then spoke with the staff, reminding them of what respect and service meant. It wasn't just about putting the family back in their seats. It was about restoring their dignity in front of everyone who had just witnessed their humiliation. For many on that flight, it was a moment they would never forget. The leader of the airline, stepping into a difficult situation, not hiding behind excuses, but confronting it head-on. At first glance, this might seem like a story about one family, one crew, and one flight. But when you look closer, it's about much more. For many travelers, especially people of color, the skies aren't always as friendly as the advertisements claim. Studies and reports have shown that bias, whether conscious or unconscious, can affect how passengers are treated. From who gets questioned at check-in, to who gets, randomly, searched, to who gets doubted when sitting in a premium cabin, the experiences often carry an extra layer of scrutiny. Think about the message this family received. They paid for their seats. They did everything right. But the unspoken message was, "You don't look like you belong here." That wound goes deeper than an inconvenience. It's about dignity, belonging, and the right to be treated equally. The CEO's actions mattered because they showed leadership in the moment. He could have ignored it. He could have let the staff handle it quietly. He could have avoided confrontation. But instead, he chose to step in, to apologize, and to make it clear that what happened was wrong. After the flight, reports say the airline didn't just let the moment pass. They launched an internal review. The CEO personally met with the family again, not in front of cameras, but in private, to listen and to promise change. New training programs were designed to help staff recognize and prevent bias. Policies were updated to make sure customers were respected, no matter who they were or where they sat. But here's the thing, this family's story is not unique. Across the world, passengers have shared stories of being questioned, doubted, or mistreated for no reason other than assumptions based on their race, their appearance, or their background. Some of those stories go viral. Many don't. That's why this incident matters. It's not just about the CEO doing the right thing in one moment. It's about recognizing how much work there is still to do. Because equality isn't about slogans on posters or polished statements. It's about the small, everyday interactions. Who gets asked to show their ticket twice? Who gets told to move without explanation? Who gets respect without question? When companies say they value diversity and inclusion, moments like this are the test. Do they act when no one is watching? Do they protect the dignity of every customer? Do they hold their staff accountable? The passengers on that flight saw what accountability looked like. They saw a leader who refused to let injustice slide. And for the family, though the day began with humiliation, it ended with something rare, not just an apology, but action. So that's the story. A black family, unfairly removed from their first-class seats, only to have the airline's CEO walk on board moments later. What began as humiliation turned into a lesson in accountability, leadership, and dignity. But the bigger question is this: why should it take a CEO to make things right? Shouldn't every customer, in every seat, on every flight, be treated with respect from the start? What do you think? Did the CEO do enough? Or should there be more consequences when moments like this happen? If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button, share it with someone who should hear it, and subscribe for more real stories that matter. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.